Thank you everyone for coming today. I'm Aron Schreier. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce. And really excited to have you here today to talk about a topic that's exciting, but not necessarily for all the right reasons. Real estate is something that is very top of mind for a lot of people, especially commercial, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also residential, because if you're going to have a presentation on real estate in New York or about real estate, you have to talk about residential. So I'm really excited to have you all with us today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I want also to say thank you to Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity, and Cushman and Wakefield for receiving us here. You know how many properties we have available between new and resale? Yes, even 100,000. 100,000? 100,000? You live in Miami, right? Miami have a lot in the market.
10,000.
Huh?
10,000.
Very nice. I cannot take that time to finish. So we have today 7,598 properties for sale. 3.8% more than last month and 0.8% more than last year. This is our supply. We can go to the next one. So now, what I brought here is since 2008 until today. You see the graph right here. In 2008, we have like 4,500, and in 2014, we had less than 4,000 property for sale. This that we call seller's market. And that time, when you have a listing, you know what's when you have a lease? Everybody here knows what's leasing. Who doesn't know? Leasing is when you have exclusivity, that property is our name to put in the market, to open the door, to show property until we find a buyer. So in 2014, we had less than 4,000. That time we say, like listing, it's like money in your pocket. It's easy to sell. So now, we go up, and we had here in 2020, October 20, 2020, more than 10,000 properties in Manhattan. It's a lot. Pending sales, what we had up to yesterday, right? What's pending sales? When we have the contract, so 1 million offer, and the seller agreed, we are waiting today to close. Today we have 3,208, 9.8% more than last month, but less now. So you're getting, when you say how is the market, it's good for buyers or for sellers. So it's 24.3% less pending sales than last year. Pending sales since 2008. You know what happened here, right? 2009. What happened?
Financial crisis.
So, no deals. Pending sales were. So then, here, you see, in 2020, remember we're talking what happened here, is almost the same level of 2019. You see how we had these big problems in 2009 and here. But all of a sudden, it started going up like this. And everybody, wow. They said that New York was dead. What's going on? And the market was hot. Everybody selling local brokers. And I was like this. Also zero sales. Just sales in Miami. Why? They said there were also Brazilians, right? And what happened that time? Markets were closing. They couldn't come here to see properties to buy. So this record of pending sales that the market wasn't big was more 4,700 property was the record for almost 40 years in pending sales, according to New York Times. So now, come with me. What's going on here? Since last year, May 2022. What happened?
Interest rates.
Huh?
Interest rates.
Interest rates. Oh my goodness, no. That's why I said I like, you don't have one day like the other one. It's always something new. So interest rate. So does it affect a lot Manhattan? I would say not much. Because we are already recording. Why? 50% of the deals done in New York are cash. And 50% finance. For me, doesn't make a difference in interest rate because Brazilians, most of them, they buy cash or they buy finance, but with the bank, they have their investments and then they give low rent. So it doesn't make a difference. But if I have one client that comes here right now, he needs to buy, he needs to finance because their kids are coming to college, they say 6% it is still okay, because in Brazil it's 13 to 14% a year. So they say okay. And when the interest rates go down, I can refinance. Second question that we get all the time, when is the best time to invest in New York? 5 years ago. If you're ready, do it now. Don't wait, because I don't want to hear, I regret I didn't buy last year. You see, now it's more expensive.
This is not a liquidity crisis. This isn't like the great financial crisis or the savings and loan disaster. There are hundreds of billions of dollars on the sidelines that are being ready to be deployed when the market finds the bottom. So that's good news. So we don't have that issue. It's also good news that the real estate market, commercial real estate, is not dead. In fact, we've seen a record amount of demand for trophy commercial real estate. Buildings like Hudson Yards, One Vanderbilt, if anyone's familiar with them. So that's exciting. People do want to have an office. I know Rachel's going to talk about that. And to try to get their folks back to work in a meaningful way. So that's also good. Another nice thing about this whole situation is that as rents start to reset and the market becomes softer and softer, that means businesses, real estate being the number two fixed cost for expenses behind the salaries, they're going to have more money to deploy for building their business, which is exciting. And lastly, I would say I started in this business a long time ago. You can tell by the gray hair that I have. It was 1999, and if anyone remembers or was alive at that time, that was the dot-com bust. And before the dot-com bust happened, so many businesses were priced out of New York. They just couldn't afford to have an office in New York City. They went to Long Island City, they went out of the state. So I think there's some hope within the commercial real estate business as it becomes cheaper and cheaper to lease office space and have a business in New York City. Maybe we'll be able to start to pull some new entrepreneurs back into New York City. So that's exciting. Does anyone know the percentage of New York City's budget that comes from commercial real estate taxation? Take a guess. 20%? 25%? 30? 30? 40? Close. 50%. So that's a lot of money. So that's great, right? Because traditionally we could always count on commercial real estate to help pay New York City's operating budget. Well, that's going to go out the window, and it's starting to happen now. Why? Because commercial real estate taxes are a function of the amount of cash flow that comes into a property, which is a function of how many people are paying rent in the building and what they're paying for it. So what's happening now is vacancies creep up, and we're beyond 22% around the country and certainly in New York, and rents start to come down. That means what? The valuations of these properties are going to start to decrease, which means real estate taxes have to go down, which means if you're a New York City resident, you're going to start, I think you have to be very careful, and I don't mean to burst your bubble, Yara. Where is this revenue going to come from, right? We're going to have to obviously cut spending, if that's going to be a possibility in New York. We all know from a political standpoint that's hard to do. We're going to have to raise taxes. So I don't know where that's going to come from. I don't know if it's going to come from an increase in sales tax, more corporate taxation, or dare I say residential real estate taxation increases. Either which way, this is not going to be sustainable. And this is starting to unfold now as we speak. Okay, so a couple things that we're really paying close attention to at Cushman and Wakefield. There was actually an article today in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read it yet, but it was talking about the amount of debt that's coming due in the next couple of years from commercial real estate. Does anyone have a guess of what that magnitude of that number is in the next 3 years? It's $1.5 trillion that's coming due, right? So just to put things in perspective, before COVID, when commercial real estate was considered a very viable asset for investing, 0.2% of buildings around the country went into default, which basically non-existent. Buildings didn't go into default. Now we're about 4%. And Schreier, who is a forecaster of real estate and an analytical company, they predict that number to get high up into the high teens, if not higher, by the end of the year. Okay? And why is this happening? And Yara touched on this. It's a function of the interest rate environment increasing. This is really a perfect storm we're talking about. Interest rates have increased significantly. Vacancy is going down. Rents are going down. So, and also to make matters worse, and we've seen this over the last few months with some of these banks who are traditional commercial real estate lenders, such as Signature, go by the wayside. And if you're a major financial institution, let's say like the JP Morgans of the world, you're going to be really reluctant to loan on office buildings right now. So the question is, even if these people can refinance, how are they going to bridge the gap where the building was valued before they bought it or refinanced it? Where's that cash going to come from? So if the landlord could essentially put up more cash to refinance the property, probably not going to happen because the buildings are so underwater. But if they were able to do that, what kind of rate would they get if they refinanced? So that's the real challenge that we're going to all start seeing, and it's starting to happen. So there's a building that came out in the paper 2 weeks ago that's going to be sold at a 40% discount on Fifth Avenue from what the landlord refinanced the property at. So what we're seeing around the country are smart institutional landlords who are in a position to just say no. They're going to take these buildings off their balance sheets. They'll take the hit on that building, the reputational risk, and they'll just forget about it and move on because they can. They have very deep pockets and a huge portfolio of stabilized assets. A lot of landlords don't have that. But back to this building. So this building is going to be sold at a 40% discount. Some entrepreneurial real estate investor is going to come in and buy that building at that discount, which is exciting. But what does that mean? The cost basis for that person, is that individual investor, is much lower than what it was previously, which means they'll be able to do deals at a 30 to 40% discount of where the market is today. So where does that put the other landlords in the surrounding area at a very significant disadvantage? Some will be able to compete, like we're seeing some institutional landlords really do aggressive deals, 2 years of free rent, for instance, on a 10-year lease, which is unheard of. I've never seen that in my 23-year career. Landlords, just to give you some perspective, when we look at deals, rent is obviously important. But equally important, especially now, are the concessions that office landlords give to tenants to come to their buildings. So you have a function of the rent, and then you look at the construction amount that landlords offer to tenants. Pre-COVID, Jonathan, what would you say, $120 a square foot?
Yep.
Maybe,
Tops.
right? Tops. That's the amount of money they would give to a tenant. So if you were 10,000 square feet, you got $1.2 million to help offset your construction costs. Because of market softness and the demands of the tenants today, that number is easily $150 a square foot right now. So that cost for a landlord has gone from $1.2 million to $1.5 million on a 10,000 square foot deal. Free rent pre-COVID, 10 months maybe of free rent. Now we're talking about 18 months to 2 years in a lot of instances on 2-year deals for certainly lower Manhattan. So when you think about that, when we look at deals, you have the rent, but then we net out those concessions. On a particular deal that I'm thinking of right now, the base rent is called $50 a square foot. Landlord's giving $150 in cash contribution to this tenant to build out their space. In 2 years of free rent, when you net that out, that $50 rent becomes $23. Operating the building and the real estate taxes on the building are significantly higher than that, which means that these landlords aren't making any money for 4 years in this situation. So again, something that's not going to be sustainable for a vast chunk of New York City landlords. We talked about this. This is good to know. We talked about some of the good news. There is this great demand for highly improved office space. And while that may sound exciting, unfortunately for New York City, that represents about 10 to 12% of our inventory. So the vast majority of New York City's real estate was built, call it pre-1980. So these are the buildings, and Rachel's going to touch on it shortly, that folks don't want to be in anymore. You have columns, you have these massive convectors, you don't have clean air, you don't have the amenities, although landlords are fighting very aggressively to add amenities to their buildings. If you're an employee that's remote and you want your folks to come back to the office, it's hard to do in these frumpy 1930 buildings. So that's a challenge too. And I just want to say this quickly. I know we have residential experts here. People always say to us, why can't you just convert these buildings? Well, there's certain buildings that you can convert, like the more boutique-y, smaller floor plate buildings are convertible. The issue is, again, the vast majority of our buildings have these huge floor plates. Like this floor you're sitting on right now is about 100,000 square feet. It's next to impossible to convert this building to residential. You're gonna have too many dark areas, it's too costly, the timing, it just doesn't make sense. So that may work for some buildings, but it's not gonna be our savior.
We did a lot of research here, and I've only brought 2 slides, but if you're interested, I recommend that you go onto our Cushman Wakefield site, and it's called Experience Per Square Foot. And we do a lot of, it was actually pre-COVID through now, and it's also international, so you might get some good information. Here in America, the biggest excuse for people is what? The commute, right? I think that's an interesting conversation about, bring the people to live in the city. It's cost prohibitive, honestly. I mean, that not only the conversion, but the people, the sort of next generation of people can't afford to live in, I'll just say Manhattan. It is cost prohibitive. But they are using the commute, or they have to walk their dog because they got a dog during COVID, all the excuses that you can have. And now companies are having the authority, right? So there's this big clash of the control by the employees and the authority that I'll say corporate America, I can't speak for Brazil, but there's going to be a point where either the company will give up, or they'll say you're fired because you didn't abide by our mandate, goodbye. Or employees are going to, especially with their managers, are going to make a deal. I mean, I have kids these age of that generation. It's pretty amazing the conversations we have. I would have never, my generation was 5 days a week plus, right? For there, it's like, what? Like, I'm going on vacation and I have, there's no PTO limit, so companies are actually doing a disservice to themselves by either not creating an environment for people to want to come back, and that's a big part of it. It's not really the workplace. I hear flight to quality, but employees, it's not actually that important to them. Job security is important. Not to deal with crime in Manhattan is important. The commute is important. The workplace, yeah, if you want to give me free coffee, that's not the reason I'm coming in, but I'll come in that day. Socialization is the #1 reason why people want to come back to the office. And so Manhattan is a great place to live and work and commute to because, after work, my goodness, there's so many bars, restaurants, shows, whatever for people to make a plan. And people are now, and employees are now coming into the office because they're going to do something after work, right? So location, obviously for real estate is important, but we're finding that CBD, having a vibrant neighborhood, is bringing people back to the office and wanting to be in a location that is right for being social. This is kind of, okay, I'm not saying that this is what people are doing, but this is what I want people to do. We are seeing a shifting of space. So it was before that this 60% of space was focused. Like you got assigned a seat, you could put your head down, you could do your work. You went up once in a while to a conference room, you got a little bit of a pantry, some amenities, and then you went home. Now it's shifting those focus seats, and you're having far fewer, and people are sharing because they're not coming in the office like you guys 5 days a week. They may be coming in 2, maybe 3, and there's a place for people to sit and be focused, and then there's a lot more space, like an airport lounge. You come in, you might want to go sit and have lunch, you may want to socialize with people in the corner over here, and it's kind of a mesh-up of corporate seating and an airport lounge, or like a high-end clubhouse, I call it. So what does that mean? It means there may be these pockets of places that are truly, you're able to focus. There's a lot of poorly designed workspace where people in workstations with those low panels or no panels are sitting on main corridors. And so I'm actually kind of one of those people. And when I'm on Zoom and I come in the office, I have to stay on mute because the people walking around me and on the phone are so noisy that sometimes I have to stay home. So what we suggest is that there are these other places, a mixture of other types of spaces where people have choices. So it's give up your desk seat. If today I come in and I want to focus, I go to that desk seat. If I want to come in and hang out with a team because I'm putting together a presentation for a client meeting coming up, or a meeting like this, hey, let's go, sit in an informal seating area with my laptop, and it always has to have technology, monitors, Wi-Fi, plugins, etc.
Do you think the toll that they're proposing now to come into the city with your car is going to have an effect?
Yes.
Yes, please.
How do you see the impact of the interest rates path in this market? Because, economists are looking for a pause next week, but some see another raise in July. Was it necessary in the interest rates path to impact this market? How do you see about it?
It's a great question. I wish John Welch was here, the previous executive director of the chamber, because he's an economist. I'm not, but I will tell you, if you're in the real estate business, you're not paying attention to interest rates, it's a real problem. And I think one of the challenging things for us is, since the job market has been so strong, right, there's still, even though, inflation, the last inflation report actually came in higher than expected. So I think there's still inflationary pressure. So there may be a pause, but I'm reluctant to believe that there's going to be a significant decrease in interest rates anytime soon. So the longer rates stay elevated like they are, even if there isn't an increase, but if they stay at present, and landlords have to now refinance their properties, it's very challenging given the burden that they have. So I think we have to pay very close attention to interest rates. And I think, if you look at the last job report, which came out last Friday, it was way above expectations. I don't see the Fed lowering rates anytime soon. I just don't. I think it's a terrible idea. That is for commercial real estate, which is crazy, right? We talk about job growth as being one of the main drivers previously. Now we're saying we don't want job growth. Bring the rates down.
Yeah, so with the Apple Vision Pro, with the big discussion that I've been overseeing is how it will replace your MacBook, for example. And given that if you put on the headset,
Right.
you can essentially replicate a 3-screen setup. So instead of having a big footprint on your desk.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's not, I got that part, but like for space needs, we're already shrinking people down to, if you're nice, you're gonna get a 6-foot wide. If you're typical, you're gonna get 4 or 5. That's not gonna change. But I took off but the socialization content, I think there's gonna be VR spaces where it's not, people are gonna choose to go to those spaces to do the work. But I don't think the space itself architecturally, it might be a furniture play, but architecturally, I'm not sure. Maybe it is no natural light, you know what I mean? And that's an indoor function. Not sure. I think it'll be interesting if somebody would play that out and if everybody was just walking around with those, well-designed, comfy devices.
That might work really well with the commercial spaces that have no windows.
Exactly, I was just thinking that.
There you go.
You might actually want to pursue that route. You're like,
Why do you have to be in the office?
Exactly.
That's another
That's what I was
excuse.
saying.
Why do you need to come in?
And then it's more about individuals, having home offices, not
No,
having to
that's probably more
dedicate,
true.
having to dedicate a full space for a home office. They could just really sit at a chair and have that whole thing. But within the office community, I don't know, within the corporate world, everybody's going to be walking around with headsets.
unless the price comes down, I don't think that's going to be an impact quite yet. It will be, but.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for coming today. We really appreciate it.